Tonight's topic is Shark Week, and is brought to you in partnership between the online Ocean Symposium and the Ocean Research Foundation.
So the Pacific Shark Research Center, the name is kind of a misnomer because we actually study sharks from all over the world, but not just sharks. We also study chondrichthyans. And so chondrichthyans are all sorts of animals with cartilaginous skeletons. That includes sharks, that includes rays, and that includes chimeras, which are also called ghost sharks.
So most of my research has to do with understanding the movement patterns of sharks and rays, and I focus mostly on local nearshore species of Southern California. I use a variety of tracking methods to follow them, so most of it's acoustic, but also satellite tags as well. Basically, I try to answer questions about the causes and consequences of these movement patterns. So what's causing them environmentally, physiologically, and then once we know what these sharks and rays are doing, how they're moving, what does that mean for community structure, for population dynamics, and even what are the conservation implications of that? And then the other part is a little bit more interdisciplinary. I have a big interest in the way that people perceive sharks as it relates to people's fear of sharks and willingness to conserve them. And so right now I'm just finishing up a study and getting ready to write it up, where we've been looking at the effect of background music in shark documentaries on the way that people perceive sharks. And in a nutshell, what we found is that, when you have this very scary Jaws-like music in the background, people see sharks very negatively. When we ask them, how well do certain words describe sharks, words like scary and dangerous, those rate very highly. But then when we have very kind of majestic, uplifting music, like what you might see with dolphin footage, it's amazing how it changes. Now people are rating words like beautiful and intelligent very high.
My project with David Ebert, we flew all the way to Taiwan to try to track down a megamouth. Large, very interesting, rare sharks, but a friend of ours had seen them in the fish markets off there. And so that's when we decided we had to get to Taiwan and do a little bit of, snooping around and do some detective work. We found a captain who said that he encounters them as bycatch. And so we went out on his boat, and amazingly happy to help. You wouldn't believe how nice these guys were. So we went out there, and we were sandwiched between two typhoons, and we had a very, very small window to try to catch a megamouth. And I was actually biting my nails the whole time because we came all this way, and I had my heart set on a megamouth. Found a large female, and we were able to tag her and release her. So it was really cool to be a part of, and it was, a crazy life experience.
Well, sharks are misunderstood. I think we can all agree on that. And the misunderstood character is a fascinating character to me from a writer's perspective. It can inject a lot of drama. It can inject a lot of humor into a situation when the audience doesn't quite understand a character. So a shark for me was the perfect lead character for my comic strip. I offered to devote this week's Sherman's Lagoons comic strips to general shark education. They're a little bit more didactic than your typical series, less of a story and more of the shark a day kind of thing. I think I did one on the cookie cutter shark. I did one on the goblin shark, for example. So there's the theme of this week's comic strips is really sharks you've never heard of.
My main focus is on white sharks. Mostly what I do is population biology, so the questions of how many sharks are out there and if these populations are healthy or if they're sort of in jeopardy. And right now with white sharks, for the most part, we're not sure. So some of the work I did was to produce the first estimates of subadults and adults in Central California. And we found that there's actually only a few hundred, and that was our first step. So we don't have a real grasp anywhere in the world, really, of what the population trends are. So a few hundred white sharks might be a totally healthy population, but it may be a signs of a declining population. But we also run the gamut. So I'll do physiology and behavior. Everybody knows that white sharks jump out of the water, but what I'm interested in is how they do that. So how does an animal that's 3,000 or 4,000 pounds go from 0 to 25 miles per hour in just a few seconds, and what actual power does its tail have to do that? Now we have a paper that's, if anybody Googles my last name and shark attacks, our paper that really talks to the truth about shark attacks in the real risk versus the perceived risk, which end up being very different.
The partnership that Ocean Research Foundation and myself have with this Google Hangout is that I was helping pick the guest. And so every single person, excluding myself, has been somehow doing shows or something shark-related that is somehow positive. Shocking Sharks with Andrew, just talking about cool ways that sharks eat. Jim Toomey has these really awesome 2-minute videos about different ocean issues. And then, of course, Alien Sharks. We have the third one now featuring, Paul. The other reason that I liked the Great White Highway that Taylor Chappell was in is because it's also one of, from what I counted, 2 programs that I could find that featured a woman scientist, someone that was predominantly featured. I tried last year to do a very intense count of what I could find from Shark Week, and other than Dr. Barbara Block, I found one with Dr. Michelle Heipel, and I believe there was one with Dirty Jobs on Greenland sharks where there was a graduate student who got to talk a lot. The Ocean Research Foundation is always looking for volunteers. You can find us on Facebook, are always looking for people to help us with social media and outreach just to amplify all these shark science facts that are constantly going out there.